You are now listening to the Here for the Truth podcast, hosted by Joel Rafidi and Yerasimos Stilianessis. Everybody, welcome back to Here for the Truth. This is episode 44, and what an incredible guest we have for you today. Some of you may recognize him. We have Alec Zeck in the house. Alec Zeck is a speaker, writer, activist, former army captain, and former grocery store manager. He's the executive director and founder of Health Freedom for Humanity, a non-profit whose mission is to unite people from all walks of life under one common purpose, the reclamation and defense of health freedom. He received his BS in systems engineering from the United States Military Academy at West Point. Alec, man, such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to Here for the Truth.
Dude, thank you for having me. I didn't expect that grocery store manager part. And as you guys both know, I'm like still having residual sweat from running, but I also have like when you run when it's cold outside and you get that cold lung that makes you cough. Uh-huh. So when you said the grocery store thing, I had to like turn away and mute my mic because I couldn't stop coughing. That was good. Yeah, I got kicked out of the grocery store I was working at because I was selling shrooms out of the back. So pretty unfortunate.
Dude, that's hilarious.
6 times, man. 6 times.
Dude, 7. I've been deleted 7. I'm on account number 8. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I wonder who has the record for most deletions.
I think I know who. The dude who runs the COVID-19 vaccine reactions account. I know who he is and I know his name, but he hasn't unmasked yet. So
no, totally.
Yeah, he's been deleted 12 times, I think. So
wow, man. Well,
what a world, huh? Like literally, what a world we're living in where this is normal. Just
dude, and the crazy thing about his account, like obviously like mine, it's nuts that I've been deleted as many times as I have, because I try to back up everything that I say with data that's easily verifiable, sometimes even using the government's own data or the CDC's own data against them, But he's literally on his account just taking actual people who are sharing their experience after getting the shot and posting it without any commentary, just like that, and getting deleted. And now he's been deleted 12 times. It's absurd, man.
So wild, man.
Yeah.
So listen, let's I want to start, man. Like, we're here for the truth. We love hearing about people's personal hero's journey as well. So it's like, obviously you have a whole life, and so there's a lot to it. But in terms of major rites of passage, like what has led you to this place where you're like, I'm going to start speaking out. I'm going to start this organization and I'm going to start speaking at rallies and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like what led to all this?
Man, it's I haven't, this is a really good question because it's like making me sit and reflect because I've been so go lately. And really what led me here is just authentically being and doing what I know I'm supposed to be being and doing. Like that is honestly it, dude. Like if you would have told me even a year ago when I was starting to, speak out about things that are going on right now, that I would be doing public speaking, like flying places at like twice a month to speak at things, I'd have told you that you're fucking high. Am I allowed to cuss on here? Oof.
Yeah, dude, you can say whatever you want, man. I'm from Jersey, dude. I curse all the time.
Okay. I would have told you that you're fucking high. Like there would have been no way. Oh, you guys have matching mugs. Where's mine?
There we go.
That's rad. That's awesome. How did you get mine? Okay. Can you like Photoshop one in maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. So dude, I mean, I've had several, like what you would call rites of passage, if you will, though, that, I was raised in a household that, let me preface this by saying I've healed so much of this. I am not a victim. And I want to say that I'm not who I am despite the trauma that I've experienced. I am who I am because of the trauma that I've experienced. Like, this is not a like, oh, woe is me, I've been through some shit, right? But I have been through some shit. Like I grew up in a very chaotic and traumatic and abusive household. My dad was repeating patterns of generational abuse and trauma. And I was physically abused quite a bit when I was younger, verbally abused when I was younger, emotionally abused, spiritually abused, every type of abuse there was, right? And I was made to believe that I was a worthless piece of shit if I wasn't a certain way. And on top of that, my mom was also in many ways repeating patterns from her side of the family as well, where she was very codependent, more focused on fixing my dad than she was on parenting us. So there's also not a lot of neglect involved, right? And so, like I said, you're made to feel like I was worthless and outsourced my self-worth into external things. And I was taught to do that from a young age because I didn't have any self-worth myself. Is always performance-based, or like the clothes I had, the friends that I could get, the girls I could get, the, like just material things, or my performance on the basketball court. And there were some good elements of that too, because my dad was very authoritarian. So if I didn't get good grades, then I would get the shit beat out of me. But that forced me to to get good grades. So I was somewhat, within the system, if you will, and intelligent, which also doesn't mean shit, but working hard and persevering through tough things. But as a result of the abuse that was inflicted upon me, my siblings, my mom, my dad went to rehab for some things. And when he went to rehab, my mom went to go see a psychiatrist by just like a very traditional evidence-based medicine, allopathic psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist didn't talk to my mom about any of the abuse that she had dealt with. Didn't talk to her about trauma healing or anything like that. Nothing about nutrition, nothing about mindfulness, meditation, any of those things. It was simply like a 15-minute conversation. Then she was prescribed multiple benzodiazepines, SSRIs. I think you guys have had my mom on the show, so you know.
We did.
Episode 29 with Alec's mom, with Alec Zeck. Incredible conversation.
Yep. And I'll save it go listen to episode 29 if you want to get more on that. But my mom found Dr. Kelly Brogan in 2016, and that sent her on a spiral of actually dealing with her shit. But she was actually expressing vitality and health for the first time in 10 years, was no longer suicidal. And that sent me down a rabbit hole of questioning. My wife healed her 2 autoimmune conditions naturally, and she was under the care of multiple rheumatologists for 10 years. After seeing my mom heal, my wife healed. And that sent me down a rabbit hole of questioning everything. But also because my mom was finding, I guess, methods and people to help facilitate her trauma healing, I started doing that as well for the first time. So I was no longer externalizing. I was actually having like my, proverbial dark night of the soul, where I was being forced to face my shadow, and heal my trauma. And all that sort of came to head in 2020, in like May of 2020. I was still in the Army at the time, and COVID hit, obviously, February. And I made a video that I actually found the other day, February 29th, 2020. So before much of the mainstream media was even talking about lockdowns or anything here, I said, this will no doubt be used for mandatory vaccines for all people. I had already like dived deep into the pharmaceutical industry corruption, 9/11, everything. So like many of us did, I saw it coming right when it happened.
Yeah.
But then I was still in the Army, and there was elements of me having to suppress who I truly was, because I didn't agree with killing already at that point. I didn't agree with the wars that we were fighting in the Army. I was very, I guess you could say, traditionally came from the left like 2.5 years ago, but was teetering more towards like voluntarism, anarchy, and anarchy in the traditional sense, not what the mainstream media projects anarchy to be. I know most of your listeners probably know what I'm talking about, but so I was already having to suppress real elements because I was still in the Army, but like having all these perceptions. Didn't agree with vaccines, already put in a religious medical accommodation in the Army, so I didn't have to get vaccines anymore. But COVID hit, and I felt so convicted to speak, man, because I had dealt with narcissistic abuse, trauma, manipulation, gaslighting. I had seen the harmful effects of blindly following allopathic doctors and how harmful pharmaceutical-backed allopathic medicine can be. I'd already seen the amazing healing possibilities of natural health. And like my son at this time was 2, and he was completely unvaccinated and like extremely healthy, especially relative to his peers. So I already knew all that. And then COVID hit, and I got to a point where I had to speak. So I started speaking despite still being in the Army, very careful with the way I said things back then. Never used the word government in anything that I said, always just alluded to it kind of, but took off from there, man, and just kept speaking on my perceptions, formed an organization surrounding that, Health Freedom for Humanity, obviously. And now we have 24 state chapters and chapters in 4 countries, and we're expanding pretty rapidly. And we do it differently, man. we're a health freedom organization that doesn't petition the government to change. We're not asking the government for permission. We're not, pleading with the government to recognize our freedom. We are empowering people to be free now. And we're creating a community, educating and empowering people around that idea. And it's outside of any racial, political, religious, socioeconomic, gender, sexual orientation. It's uniting people from all walks of life. And we really, really stress the importance of that, because it's not a political thing. It is not a religious thing. This is a human rights thing, specifically speaking to health freedom. So that's what I continue to do. And here I am now. And I never would have guessed that I'd be doing this. So that's it.
I love it, man. From West Point to health freedom for humanity, man. It's pretty cool. I'm just curious. What was it where you were like, I'm going to go to West Point. I'm going to go be in the Army.
So I was recruited to play basketball at West Point. Like I said, like growing up, my entire childhood, middle school, elementary school, high school, was focused around basketball, was focused around sports. Like that was my entire life. And it was always like a life or death. Like that's how it felt for me, life or death. My dad, like up until age 10, my dad was a college basketball coach. Then he got fired from his job as college basketball coach for some things some pretty sketchy things he's doing behind the scenes, but he's an amazing coach. And then he became my AAU basketball coach, which is like a travel basketball team, like club basketball, right? When I was in elementary school, middle school, and then all throughout high school. And basketball was my whole life, man. Like that was everything. But I was so afraid of failure because it was made to be like almost like a life or death thing for me, where if I didn't perform, I would get my ass beat or I would get cussed out, right? And because I was so afraid of failing and I was self-identifying with my performance, I fucked up all the time. I was constantly messing up. If I played well, I would play well and drop like 40 points. If I missed my first 2 shots, my dad would be like, get your fucking head in the game. And then I would be afraid to mess up and then I would play horrible. Mm-hmm. So, and that led to a lot of injuries too. So I got injured literally every year in high school. And the only D1 school that was recruiting me was West Point. Okay. Every other one was a D2 offer, right? So I went to a basketball recruit camp for all the dudes at West Point was recruiting my junior going into senior year of high school. And I grew up in a military community, although like my family itself wasn't military. Just like the high school I went to is right near a military base. So a lot of my friends' parents went to West Point as well. So after going to look at West Point and, with the mindset of like in the system, seeing how many like historic generals graduated from there, how many Fortune 500 CEOs of Fortune 500 companies went to West Point, and just all that West Point offered, one of the top public universities in the United States. It wasn't even being in the Army. I didn't give a shit about that. It was that I was being recruited for basketball, and then having a degree from West Point in the system meant a lot. Mm-hmm. So that's what led me to go to West Point. And then I got cut from the basketball team right when I got there. So
this is why I didn't know you played hoops, man. I love it. I love playing hoops my whole life, but it's been fucking probably 10, 15 years since I've played, but that's awesome.
Yeah. So basketball was my life growing up, man. It was everything. That's what I self-identified with. So
yeah. What do you think of the Kyrie situation?
Dude, Kyrie's always been my favorite point guard, and now I know why.
Okay.
Yeah, I love Kyrie. I love what he's doing. Like being one of the only people that's willing to speak up. I also don't think LeBron got the vaccine either. I don't think half of the like bigger names got the vaccine.
Dude. Yeah, I don't buy it.
No chance.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely don't buy it.
It's pretty crazy now because now they're saying basically they're saying that the J&J vaccine is useless because now they just put out a statement, the NBA Association, saying everyone that's got the J&J vaccine needs to get a booster, right?
Dude, it's because they want to do whatever they can for whatever reason to get this mRNA technology into our bodies.
Yeah.
That is my thought process on that. And I mean, I don't think that is not saying that like, oh, the J&J shot is safer. That's not what I'm implying either. But I really think they're doing whatever they possibly can to get this mRNA technology into our bodies.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that point, man, without a doubt. It's like usual. They keep pushing the goalposts. It's like when the people who did, consent to making this decision to go, I'm just doing it because I want to go to a concert or because I want to do this or because I want to do that. It's like, it's not ending. It's just, it's just going and going and going, which is it's predictable,
from-
which is what I thought a year ago. You know, I was like, this is what's going to happen. This is the game plan.
So
Dude,
from
this is
your,
what everyone thought it was going to have. Or
Yeah.
your
everyone said
experience,
this was going to happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
my bad. Go ahead.
you're right, man. From your experience, what is the long game with mRNA?
Dude, there's so many. I don't want to apply too much conjecture to this. And I'll preface this by saying that I fundamentally believe that the body is self-healing. So I don't believe, I know that the body is self-healing, self-regenerating, and that human beings, like our capacity to heal ourselves of anything is far greater than we've ever been led to believe. And so with that, I think a lot of people in the so-called health freedom, truth seeking, whatever community tend to forget that or set that aside, that belief that they supposedly hold, in order to fear monger on the harmful effects of this vaccine. And to be clear, do I think the vaccine is killing people? Yes. Do I think it is harming people? Yes. Do I think that there is any redeeming qualities of this? Absolutely not. Do I also think that a human being who genuinely perceives that stuff is good for them and that it will help them can trick their body into accepting that and it being good for them? Possibly as well. But my point is, I do not think that millions of people who receive this are going to die come the rest of this fall or winter time. I think as we continue to receive these products, we will continue to poison ourselves, and then we will have potentially more harmful effects for sure. And that's where it's important to get back to the understanding that the body is self-healing, self-regenerating, because if you get people to understand that at the foundation, then receiving this thing wouldn't even be on the table, because it's like, no, why would I need this product if I know that if I treat my body well, and if I, treat my mind, body, and spirit as a temple, then I can be well, right? Like my body's ability to heal itself. I'm not afraid of any so-called virus, and we can get into that. But
yes,
it's an entire mindset shift. But then I think there's other possible implications surrounding patent law, and whether you can. This one's tough, because I don't want to speak too much on this, because it's like, do I believe this has the capability to edit your DNA, right? Or to alter your DNA? Yes, I think it could. Do I think the human genome is constantly changing and re-expressing itself? Yes. So do I think anything is permanent? No, but we know that something that is naturally existing cannot be patented, or owned, even as it applies to human beings. And there's court cases that have settled that. So is it possible that people who continue to receive these products are able to be owned in a certain way? Yes, I do think so, especially with the understanding that everything that is happening, for the most part, at least at the highest level, we are consenting to it. And that's either that we are actually expressing that we are consenting to it, or it's implied consent by our actions. So most of this we are consenting, most, if not all, of the things that are happening to us that they are doing, we are allowing to happen by consenting to it. So it's that maybe we are in many ways consenting and contracting with the government or whatever nefarious entity to allow them to own us in many ways. So that could be another possible thing.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, man. Those are thoughts that have been going on in my head as well. You bring up you bring up such an important point on the body's innate intelligence, on the body's innate healing capacity. And if people could understand and apply what happens when they cut their finger, and then apply that concept to the rest of their body. Like if you cut your finger, there's all these little things that are going to happen and whatever, I'm not going to get into it. And then the body, after a few days, there's a healing process. You didn't have to do anything. You didn't need to take any supplements. You didn't need to do this, X, Y, and Z.
You don't have to think about it.
Doing it.
Yeah, you don't have to think about it. Exactly. And imagine if you have because we do, and all discussions on Joe Dispenza's turn towards whatever he's turning towards now aside, what he has taught in the past absolutely is beautiful and brilliant and spot on with how the human body works, with how consciousness works. Like if we have the ability to tap into that natural innate intelligence into our body and consciously manifest and bring it about, then we can heal ourselves of fucking anything. And we don't require any pharmaceutical product to do so.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, there's these adaptive processes that happen. The same thing's happening deep in within the body, at the tissue level, at the organ level. But what happens is we're conditioned to fear so much, to fear diagnoses, to fear words. And what does that then do to our psyche? And so it's like to really connect deep within to that level where it's like, my body is a fucking walking miracle. It is incredible. Wow. It's amazing. Look what happens. I just cut my finger. That is so fucking cool. You know, but unfortunately, the way the system has been, you look at the last 100 years, it's just like you go to an allopathic doctor and then they go, you have cancer. And then what does that do? You know, oh fuck, I'm gonna fucking die. You know, so it's just this wild like domino effect that occurs. And it's like, really, how do we get back to the foundation of that belief that you talked about, man? It's so important. It's why education is huge. It's why disconnecting from the matrix, from the system, getting information from other things, and then at the same time just tapping into that deep wisdom that you know, connecting to source, God, nature, whatever that is for you. When I just really believe that when you do that, when you really connect to that essence, all this stuff fades away. You're like, wait, what? You want me to do what? Nah, I'm not doing that.
Exactly, dude. I don't even think I need to comment on that because everything you just said, like, I don't think I could add anything better than what you just said. Spot on.
That's why there's so many interesting demographics. When you look around, all the different types of people that are choosing to say yes or no to this experimental medication. And it's just interesting to observe, like, what is it? There was I think, at the beginning of this year, there were chiropractors and Chinese medicine doctors who were recommending, sending out their newsletters, telling people to get the shot. And I go, okay, so you're connected to spirit and nature on paper, but in reality, you couldn't be further from it.
Dude, when we were dropping off these flyers for our event around the Kansas City area, I went to a bunch of chiropractic offices, of course, and like naturopathic doctors' offices and, functional medicine offices. And it was so crazy because most of them, like on their door, like on their signage, they'll have like a little saying of their mission statement underneath and talk about how the body like is amazing and it heals itself, nature, this, and that. And then on the other side, say like masks required, and you walk in and then the receptionist is wearing a face shield and a mask and gloves doing temperature checks. And it's just like, the amount of so-called holistic practices that are going against their foundational teachings is insane. And this is where, like, I don't know if you guys know Dr. Tommy John. He and I used to be really, really good friends. We've sort of shifted ways now just because the way he approaches things. But I do agree with him on this, man. Like the allopathic systems need to crash, and all the holistic systems need to crash too. All of it needs to fucking go. All of it, especially because all the holistic ones are trying to play allopathic and trying to be like the white lab coat, have as many titles as you can after your last name so that you're the authority figure. You tell people how to heal instead of turning people back to themselves to understand. And then you're facilitating that, guiding them back to themselves and that understanding rather than having them outsourced to you, allopathic or not. And it's even worse when these so-called holistic doctors, like when I go to those offices and they're talking about nature, like it's almost like a fad. It's like they're just saying that because it's a fad thing, but you don't actually fundamentally know that. You're not actually teaching that to your patients when you're also saying that in one hand and then requiring them to come in and wear masks and vaccines. I could see if you were saying like, hey, if you want to wear a mask, or even if you had a sign door, like if you want to wear a mask, totally valid, because that at least like you're a stepping stone for them. You can still like teach them in many ways, and you don't even have to talk about the vaccine in some situations. If you get them to understand the body's self-healing and self-regenerating, they will come to that understanding on their own. But when you're actually blatantly saying masks required, well, you're not about it. You're not actually about what you say you're about. So I agree that all systems need to crash, and we just need to get back to nature and health and empowering people to go within themselves.
Yeah, man. Well, it's just a marketing front, right? Basically, for these practitioners. And I mean, at the same time, this is the silver lining of this time, is that those that aren't really in integrity with their true mission are being exposed at the same time, because there's a clear metric at this point for actually who is on the path of authenticity and who means what they say and who doesn't, even within the health, truth, and freedom communities.
Yeah, and also too, in terms of like, obviously you have allopathic here and more natural holistic practitioners. You know, a lot of times it's like, oh, well, I'm not giving you a pharmaceutical, but I'm telling you, you have to spend $1,000 and get 82 different supplements, this XYZ, and it's like, what? You know,
Yeah,
and
dude.
even from a healing standpoint, you know, I'm a beginning student of German New Medicine, Germanic healing knowledge. Is like a lot of times, once you start getting symptoms, that's showcasing that you're in a healing response. And so people will take these natural supplements that'll stop that natural process that's happening, that adaptive process that's happening in your body. And so, yeah, maybe it's not as toxic that you're getting some pharmaceutical, but you're also inhibiting a process that is natural that the body needs to go through to some degree.
Yeah, and that's where it's like if you are to take supplements, it's a shift in perception. It's not that like you're doing this, you're taking this specific thing. Let's say, for example, vitamin C, right? Like I'm not going to eat a bunch of oranges because I'm afraid, because I'm having a healing response. It's because I'm aiding my body's ability to express that healing response. Does that make sense? It's like anything that is still just masking symptoms or stopping your body's healing response is absolutely in the same line of thinking as allopathic medicine. And this is where, like, man, this is a deep conversation on an individual's perception, because I think many people, for example, and this is not always the case, jump on the ivermectin train because it's like, oh, I'm afraid, I'm like, you know, I feel like my lungs are collapsing, so I'm just going to take this ivermectin because I'm so afraid of what's happening to me right now. You know what I mean? But then like there is, I don't want to say evidence, but like there is a thought process and a potential mechanism behind ivermectin in that it is purely a zinc ionophore that helps your body absorb zinc better. So like maybe in that case, it might work, but the whole perception behind it, which is why 99.999% of people are taking it, is that it's like, oh, I'm afraid of the symptoms associated with this disease, so I'm going to take that to stop those symptoms. And that is completely wrong.
I agree. And people are like taking it like it's candy, like, oh, I'm just preventative, just in case, you know, I'm just pop a few ivermectins. It's totally
you don't
fine.
you don't need any, like, and I mean this, and I truly mean this. You do not need any pharmaceutical products. Like, I don't care what they are. You do not need them. You can find something that nature provides that is just as powerful, if not more powerful, than pharmaceutical products. Most, if not all of them,
are based.
Some are synthesized in the lab, but most, if not all, are based in what nature already provides.
Yeah, but you can't patent nature. So it's like, well, let's synthesize this from this natural compound, and then we could patent it, and then we could sell it for 5,000% more than what we're making it for, and make a little bit of money on the side. It's
exactly,
wild, man.
Exactly.
I mean, and that's the game in all industry, not just pharmaceuticals. I mean, look at what Monsanto's done for years. You know, even talking about patenting like potentially DNA, they've been patenting crops, right? They've even been growing plantations. Then I think the wind carries the seeds into other organic farms or natural farms, crop circles, whatever it might be, and then they can end up patenting their seeds on that farm as well, simply because those seeds have been carried to the other farm.
Fucking hate that. That makes me so angry.
I know,
yeah, man, it's crazy. And I mean, obviously, GMO is another conversation, and where this is going, it's who knows. But I mean, we can't buy into the doom and gloom narrative by any means whatsoever, you know, because this is ongoing at the moment. We're in the war now. We're in the fight now. It's happening in real time. There's good people in all levels of the game doing good and powerful things. So to everyone that gets swept away in they're all powerful, it's all over, we're all going down one track. I just really implore people to come back to the moment and look at things with a little bit more perspective, because at the same time, everything is being exposed, right? And without this event, without these circumstances, we would never have really looked twice or looked anywhere near as deep as we are looking now behind the veil.
I also too, like, based on what you said, if I'm going to sit here and say that there's this innate intelligence in my body, this healing capacity that's happening, why can't I apply that to what's happening in the world? That there's this process happening and there's symptoms and there's things that are just, it's just, I don't need to fear it. Like, we're living, let's say there's a global body, and what's happening right now is like, whoa, crazy symptoms and heal. And I'm going to be afraid of it? Like, no, I'm going to do my part, but trust that things will develop and continue to adapt, and we will heal. That's my view.
Dude, 100%, man. I mean, this is like a collective dark night of the soul. Mm-hmm. Like I mean, for anyone that's had, and I'm assuming it, like you two have at some points in your life, had a dark night of the soul, that shit was fucking hard and very, very, very traumatic. And like going through all of your, or like drumming up all of your shadows that you haven't dealt with yet, and having to really look at them and then authentically choose a new path for yourself. That is some tough shit, right? And that's what we're in the middle of collectively right now. But it's beautiful what's going to happen on the other side if we let it. We can either evolve through this or repeat and go back into the same bullshit patterns. And a lot of people right now are being faced with a decision where they have one foot still in the door in the system and one foot out. And maybe they're getting, medical exemptions and philosophical exemptions and religious exemptions, or they're doing notices of conditional acceptance of notice of liability. And it may work. And it may be that, like, when it comes to this individual piece of the system, we overwhelm it so much because so many people say, like, take their monopoly piece there off of the chessboard and don't even say no, just say, no, I'm going to be free. I'm going to be free. So we overwhelm the system and force it to change, or we're stepping away from the system. But either way, people are still in this dance where they have one foot in the door of the system and one foot out, and they're trying to hang on to both worlds. And that's not going to last any longer. Like these exemptions that people are getting, those will only bide you time. They're not going to last. And you're going to be forced with the decision to either get completely out of the system and face that harsh reality that the system needs to collapse, or you're going to have to comply with the system. And it's going to be one or the other.
Yeah,
absolutely, man. Like on some level, the system is intentionally pushing everything that's good out, right? Look what's happening in the schooling, in the schooling world, and in the hospital, like all the good nurses, all the good teachers, right? Nothing that can still expose the system is being allowed to stand by any means. And I mean, I've been telling everyone for the last 2 years, just position accordingly, because whatever thread that you have now where you think you can still have this dance to keep one foot in the system, it's really not going to be there for long.
Exactly. And I want to be clear on this. Like, of course, there are people who have situations like a mom who's a nurse that has 4 kids and is working at a hospital, and that's her only source of income. Like, am I saying that she's absolutely screwed and a week from now she's going to be like, that she shouldn't do a medical exemption? No. Like, of course, bide yourself time if you have to, but just understand that you need to be setting yourself up to be reliant outside of the system. You need to be looking for opportunities outside the system, because it is going to come to a point where it's either that, like I said, that specific situation, let's say at that hospital, so many people overwhelm it by saying, no, we're not going to participate with this. We're all going to quit. All 100 employees are going to quit and go elsewhere unless you change, and we're forcing you to change. And that's a shift in perception, even on from a political lens, that like we are not begging the system to change. We are not asking the system for permission. We are telling the system that, like, hey, I'm going to be free. I am free by virtue of existing. It's either you get on board with it and you adapt, otherwise you're going to collapse and we're going to go over here and start something better.
Mm-hmm. And you hear so many stories of that happening. I remember some article or someone posted a tweet where it was like, even in maybe not a large company, but it was like a dentist office or something. And the 4 like dental assistants like got together and they just said like, yeah, so we're putting in our notice. And the main dentist was like, oh, no. Okay, no worries. You don't have to get it. It's fine. So,
exactly.
Again, you're right. Like, what's to stop people from coming together and just forming an unofficial union, I guess you could say, just their own union together and being like, we ain't having this. You can take that shit and go fuck yourself.
Exactly. And what's so beautiful, man, is that, like, even if you're in a situation right now where you're one of the only people inside your business, your practice, wherever, that is like saying no, and they do fire you, there's so many people who are on the same page as you that are starting things outside the system that are going to be so much better from the ground up, that are going to be so much better than what you're doing inside the system. So regardless of if you're by yourself, and it is, I acknowledge that is a very scary thing for sure. If you're by yourself, you're one of the only people in your office that has that perception, but even more beautiful, when you do have the courage to stand up and be like, nope, I'm not fucking doing this, you'll probably see 1, 2, 3, 4 other people in your office that are like, I needed someone else to stand up first. Thank God you did that. I'm standing up too. But regardless of whether it's just you or it's multiple people, either way, it is the best thing for you, because you're either going to force that to the system itself to change, like I said, or you're going to be booted out of the system. Good. You should be booted out of that system because that system sucks anyway.
Yeah. And the self-empowerment, that feeling that comes from standing in your truth and doing something like that, there's no price tag on that. When you really stand up for something, and then what happens on the other side after you've gone through that, what that gives you, there's no money in the world. You know, and again, I'm not here to discount like, hey, people have real bills to pay, this, that, and the other. Everyone has to make their own choice. But we're almost 2 years into this. There's Health Freedom for Humanity. How many chapters did you say? There's all these other orgs. Like, this is something that's out there. This isn't like 4 months in where people are like, I'm the only person in my friends group. I'm the only person in my family. I don't know anyone. What the fuck? This is crazy. I just lost my boyfriend, my girlfriend. Like, there's a large community all over the world, you know, so you can make those connections. It's just a matter of whether or not you want to and believe it and can stand in it.
Yeah.
Dude, exactly. And that's what's beautiful, because like we are just one of many organizations. Like we have 24 state chapters and chapters in 4 countries, and we're expanding. There's Freedom Keepers United, who's very similar perception as us. There is Derek Brose's Freedom Cells. There's a bunch of different organizations that are very like-minded in this that you can find in your area. There's absolutely community there. What it usually requires is your willingness to authentically express who you are and your authentic perceptions.
Yeah, my wife and I, we moved from Santa Monica to Topanga last year, and several months ago we started having like freedom parties. We have these massive parties, and there were people in the beginning that were like, I'm literally the only person in my friend group and my family that has these views. I was going to move out of California because I felt alone, and now I don't. You know, and then what's the ripple effect of that?
Yeah.
You know, the relationships, the connections being made, and then who knows what comes from that. So it's just, you know, there's community. There is. We're not just 3 weirdos sitting around doing nothing and be like, oh, we just have these views and we're on a phone call right now and everyone thinks we're crazy.
We are pretty weird though.
Yeah, that's very true. That's true.
Speak for yourselves. The point is 100%. You have to make that. You have to cross that bridge within yourself first. You know what I mean? Because while you're still teetering on the edge and still have that uncertainty within yourself, you're going to call that in externally as well. So until you can fully embody it, I'm going to stand in my authenticity. I'm going to stand in my integrity. I'm going to live my life according to my deeper values, morals, and what feels intrinsically correct to me. Then it's going to open up for you the opportunities in the external world.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Yeah. All right. I want to get into this, man. A little while ago, you posted a tweet. I'm probably going to butcher it, but it was like, if XYZ hasn't been shown to exist, and then it then leads to XYZ symptom, like, you know, like talk about that tweet. Like, how do we know this thing? Everyone talks about, well, it hasn't been isolated. Like, has it? Has it not? What does that mean? And how is it all of a sudden this thing that hasn't been isolated then leading to all these different symptoms?
Okay. So it depends on your definition of isolated.
Okay.
So if you think of isolation as taking one thing and having it completely separate of other things, then no, it has not been isolated. If you think of isolation in the terms of putting a bunch of things together and then that thing breaks down into a bunch of fragments after you put a bunch of things inside of a thing, if you think that is the definition of isolation, then yes, it has been isolated. So what I was saying is on the X and Y thing is if you hypothesize that X exists and causes Y, then you need to observe X existing and causing Y, right? You can't say X exists and causes Y. Y, therefore X exists, if you have never proven that X exists. What I mean by that is you can't hypothesize a virus exists and causes disease. Disease is present, therefore it must be a virus if you have never proven that a virus exists. And at face value, that statement is going to sound batshit crazy. But here's the deal. Every single paper, every single one, you can type in on Google or DuckDuckGo isolation of, and then put any virus you want. Just for the sake of what we're dealing with in the world right now, put SARS-CoV-2, isolation of SARS-CoV-2. You'll find hundreds of papers where the title of the paper is that isolation of SARS-CoV-2. But if you read the methodology describes a process that is exactly the opposite of what we know isolation to be. So I'm going to use an analogy that Dr. Cowan has used in his book, The Contagion Myth, that is one of the best analogies. But even this analogy is still missing a piece of it too, and I'll explain that in a minute. So if I were to try to prove that a ping pong ball, or if I were to hypothesize that a ping pong ball could break down a brick wall, I would obviously need to observe that ping pong ball breaking down that brick wall, right? Like that's just logic, right? So if I were to take a giant hammer and smash the brick wall several times, and then tape the ping pong ball to a giant boulder, and then throw the boulder at the brick wall and the brick wall falls down, have I proven that the ping pong ball caused the destruction of that brick wall? I would say no, because I think any person who's thinking logically would say, no, you already smashed the brick wall with a hammer and then you taped the ping pong ball to a giant rock. So how could you possibly say that the ping pong ball caused the destruction of that brick wall? So how this relates to virology, going back to the virus isolation papers that I'm referring to, which are the foundational evidence for viruses as pathogenic disease causing agents, right? They take snot from a sick host, and inside snot from a sick host, or snot or spit, semen, blood, inside any of those fluids from a sick host are millions of RNA, DNA, toxins, food particles, proteins, red blood cells, white blood cells, so much shit inside unfiltered fluids from a sick host, right? They take that unfiltered fluids and they put it on a monkey kidney cell known as a Vero cell culture, alongside fetal bovine serum, Delbecko's modified eagle medium, which are food sources for the cell, and then also minimal nutrient medium, which means that they're giving the cell the minimal amount of nutrients, which effectively means they're starving the cell, right? So they put all that on there alongside amphotericin, gentamicin, sometimes one or the other, sometimes both, and then also trypsin sometimes. And if you look up amphotericin toxic kidneys, like just type in amphotericin toxic kidneys on Google or DuckDuckGo, or type in gentamicin toxic kidneys, you will find a number of articles where they are known to be toxic to kidneys. So they're taking those antibiotics and also putting them on the monkey kidney cell. So again, this isolation experiment, right? They're taking all of these things and putting it on a monkey kidney cell, starving and poisoning the kidney cell. The cell then breaks down into a bunch of fragments, experiencing what is called the cytopathic effect. They take pictures of the fragments with an electron microscope, electron micrograph imagery, and they say that those fragments are viruses, right? So again, relating it back to the ping pong ball example, they have never taken the ping pong ball completely by itself and thrown it at the brick wall, meaning they have never taken the virus that again, this is where the ping pong ball itself, example itself, is even somewhat off because we can see the ping pong ball. We know that the ping pong ball is there. They presuppose that there is a virus inside the fluids of a sick host that they're introducing to this cell culture along with those other things. And they just assume that it is the virus inside the fluids of a sick host that is causing this cell to break down. They just make that assumption without ever having proven that there is a virus inside the fluids of a sick host. How do we know that that's the truth? Ask any virologist, molecular biologist, microbiologist, immunologist, epidemiologist, whatever profession, whatever ologist you want to say, ask them to provide you one single paper in which a virus was isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced directly from the fluids of a sick person, and they cannot do it. Every single isolation paper is with the methodology that I just described. Every single one of them. They have never, ever, ever foundationally proven that a virus is inside the fluids of a sick person. Ever. It has never been done.
Didn't something go down with Dr. Longo where he like put out some kind of bet on this? What happened? Do you know what happened with that?
Yes. So I don't remember the exact year, But
Oh, and real quick, I just want to say I'm an avid ping pong player, and I play often, and I've smashed ping pong balls to the brick behind my table, and it's never shattered. Just wanted to put that down in there. Okay, continue your story.
Just quickly before. Also, before you go into the story, man, this is just wild because before you came on, we asked you for your birth details. And so in human design, your personality sign based on the I Ching, the Chinese divination system, is 62. You translate that to gene keys, which is another system, and you get an archetype. And this is just crazy based on the analogy that you just provided. But the archetype for you is called the scientist, right? I'm just going to read you these 2 sentences. The scientist is a master of naming things, concepts, and facts. He assembles, organizes, and labels the details. A true scientist provides logical, thorough information that everyone can understand and has a gift of explaining the intangible, making it accessible through clear, factual expression. So like literally, man, it's like you were born for this, man. You were born to be and do exactly what you were doing on such a deeper level than most of us even know. It's just crazy how these things always present themselves. And as you went through that analogy, I just remembered reading that. I'm like, this guy.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I've had Dr. Cowan and Kaufman tell me that I'm like one of the best that they know of breaking this down into layman's terms. So
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
I think our audience is going to appreciate that too, because some of this stuff can get really obviously uber scientific and technical and heady, and not everyone has the capacity, but to be able to hear it in a way that you can follow and make sense, man, is huge.
Yeah, dude. Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I want to, like, obviously reading the methodology of a virus isolation paper. Like when I first started doing it, I had no idea what the fuck I was looking at. So I would email Dr. Cowan all the time and ask him like, hey, this one, I think it shows virus isolation. And then he would respond to me with like, no, here's here where it's wrong. This is what this means. So it finally got to a point where like, he was like, Alec, you are smart enough to figure this out on your own. And like anyone can do what I'm doing. And I also have to give a shout out to one of my friends, or a few of my friends, Jordan Grant, who's a urologist, brilliant human being. And then Jacob Diaz, he's a dude just like me out of New York that is probably the most brilliant terrain theory mind that I know, especially breaking it down into layman terms.
Cool.
His account on Instagram that everyone needs to follow is called Undercover Virologist, and the dude is brilliant. But yeah, so Stefan Lanka. So Stefan Lanka is himself a virologist, right? And I guess he likes to say a molecular biologist rather than virologist because he thinks virology is completely pseudoscientific. And so Stefan Lanka a few years back put out a statement that if anyone can prove the existence of the measles virus, and he laid out some criteria for that, right? And it's very logical criteria. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like that this thing has been separated of all genetic material completely by itself, has been identified, has been characterized, right? And then has been introduced to a sick host by itself and shown to cause disease. Essentially following, I think, and don't quote me on this, and people go look for yourselves, but essentially following Koch's postulates, right? Mm-hmm. But he put out a statement like basically saying, if anyone can prove the existence of the measles virus, I'll pay you 100,000 euros. And originally, someone presented evidence, I think another scientist, and a German court ordered that he had to pay. And of course, the mainstream news ran with that, like virus denier, molecular biologist, Stefan Lanka, forced to pay in German court, yada, yada, yada. What happened though is he appealed that, basically showing where that dude had not shown that the measles virus exists, because he was using the same papers that I was just describing, where it's the Vero cell culture isolation method to prove that measles exists, right? And he had not proven it. So Stefan Lanka still has his 100,000 euros. No one has sufficiently proven the existence of the measles virus, and he still has his 100,000 euros. And more importantly, this is good that you brought him up, is Stefan Lanka is in the middle of phase 2 of his control experiment. So I want to start by saying that the definition of pseudoscience is anything that claims to be science but does not strictly adhere to the scientific method, right? So within the scientific method, especially when conducting like really really in-depth experiments and you're trying to validate your claim, you have to have like identified an independent variable, right? You have to, aim or at least try to validate your foundational claim, and you have to conduct control experiments. Virology has done neither of those three things. They have never validated their foundational claim that there's a pathogenic disease causing virus that exists inside the fluids of a sick person, right? They have never identified an independent variable because they have never done what I just described. They have never identified a pathogenic disease causing virus by itself inside the fluids of a sick person as they presuppose, right? And then they have never conducted control experiments on their Vero cell culture isolation method, right? So Stefan Lanka has conducted those control experiments. And what I mean by that is Stefan Lanka has done the exact same, relating it back to the brick wall analogy, the exact same thing without even introducing the ping pong ball, meaning that he just had the brick wall, smashed it with a hammer several times, took a giant boulder, threw it at the brick wall, the brick wall fell down, and he was like, voila, like it's the same thing, So with the Vero cell culture isolation method, he used the exact same ingredients, except for he did not even put the supposedly infectious material that they presuppose contains the virus into the mix at all. He put all the other same things in there, and the same result happened, right? The same exact thing, which completely invalidates all of these so-called isolation papers, right? And from my understanding, this is in the midst of peer review right now, I think, or I think he is having it published or putting it up for peer review here soon. So phase 2 of this, and I want to preface this by saying, or lay the context for this correctly, is that, people usually respond to the lack of proper control experience with, okay, well, we've genomically sequenced the virus thousands of times. That's how we've identified the Lambda variant, the Delta variant, the Delta plus variant, this variant, that variant. Like it's been genomically sequenced thousands of times. We have the full RNA sequence for this virus, and it's been uploaded. You can download it from multiple laboratories. You can look at it yourself. But here's how that goes. The very first genomic sequence of the so-called genomic sequence of SARS-CoV-2 went like this. They took one patient sample, they extracted 56.5 million fragments of RNA from that one patient sample, right? And remember, inside a patient sample, I would argue that it's not 100% purified virus, right? Inside a sample of snot is a bunch of shit. Mm-hmm. So they extracted basically every fragment of RNA that they could from that snot. And then there was long strands of RNA, short strands of RNA. They threw out all the long ones, and they took these short ones and rearranged it, or like strung it together in a computer program based off of a template of SARS-CoV-1, which they isolated in the exact same way that I described earlier, right? So they have this template of SARS-CoV-1 in the computer, its so-called sequence of RNA, right? And they string it together to match SARS-CoV-1. They generated 1 million possible new sequences of a so-called new virus that when templating against SARS-CoV-1, and they arbitrarily picked the longest one and said, voila, here is a new sequence of a new virus. So
it's like a lie built upon a lie, built upon a lie, and it just keeps going.
Well, and are all virologists in on it? No, I don't think that at all. I think that they have just never questioned the foundational methods of virology. And this method for Vero cell culture isolation was first done in 1954 by John Franklin Enders, who is the guy who so-called discovered the so-called measles virus, or said to have discovered the so-called measles virus, right? And what's interesting is in his paper where he, quote, discovered the measles virus, he admitted that when he did a proper control experiment, and he did do a proper control experiment, the exact same result happened. So he did control experiments back then. But John Enders went on to win the Nobel Prize and also created the measles vaccine. So everything thereafter was sort of ushered in as this is acceptable science. I want to pull something up though, because I want to describe exactly what John Enders used in his first 1954 isolation experiment, the so-called isolation of measles. So he had throat, blood, and poop samples, milk, streptomycin, penicillin, bovine amniotic fluid, beef embryo extract, horse serum, antibiotics, formaldehyde, hematoxylin, eosin, soybean, trypsin, phenol red, and he put it all in a monkey kidney cell. The cell broke down into a bunch of fragments, and he said, I've isolated the measles virus.
Wow.
That was the first so-called isolation of a virus, and that method has been modified over time, but it's basically, that is the foundation for virology right there. That right there. In his own admission, and this is the quote, this is John Enders himself in that paper. The cytopathic changes it induced in the unsustained preparations, meaning the one that he did the control without even introducing blood, poop, or throat samples at all, could not be distinguished with confidence from the virus isolated from the measles sample. So that was his own admission back in 1954, right? So yeah, and so I just think that virologists have never questioned the foundational evidence of their profession, right? And it's all built upon this. And when it comes to the genomic sequence, this is phase 2 of Stefan Lanka's control experiment. So like, again, like I described that genomic sequencing process, Stefan Lanka took a random sample of yeast, grew it on a cell culture, did the exact same process. And after amplifying PCR, I think 40 cycles, which is what they do to do the original genomic sequencing, he was able to get 100% of the so-called SARS-CoV-2 viral genome without even having a patient sample. It was random yeast grown on a cell culture.
Clown show, man.
I don't like, this is either testament to just the complete severe indoctrination that most of these so-called virologists, the spell that they're under, or you're right, they're all in on it, which I don't think so either. But at the end of the day, if this is your profession and you carry the integrity of the scientific method, how are more mainstream virologists or scientists not looking at this and questioning this?
Dude, I don't know, man. It's really crazy too, because like I started looking into this stuff like pretty early on in the so-called pandemic, right? Like this is what I obsessed over from the very beginning, because I'd already done like a lot of the vaccine research and stuff. And that's why like when people ask me questions about the technology of the vaccine, I don't know the intricate details, because it's not, obviously it's relevant, but what's more relevant is getting to the root of what causes disease, right? And it's really tough, because at first I was, scared to speak on this. And then I like became more confident. And I finally got to a point where I was confident enough to ask virologists, or just like point blank ask on Twitter, can anyone provide me, just asking, I'm serious. Can you provide me one single paper in which a virus was isolated, purified, characterized, and sequenced directly? And I would put asterisks around directly to emphasize that, directly from the fluids of a sick person. And no one can provide me one single paper. And that is asking for foundational evidence. That is asking for them to follow the scientific method. Or I'll ask another question. Can anyone provide me one paper in which virology strictly adheres to the scientific method and validates their foundational claim of a pathogenic disease causing virus inside the fluids of a sick person? No one can provide me one paper. And I'm not asking that to be like, aha, gotcha. I'm asking that because that is how science works. I'm asking them to follow the scientific method, and I cannot find one. If someone can find one where they follow the scientific method, awesome. I will be like, yes, here's the paper that follows the scientific method and validates the foundational claim of a pathogenic disease causing virus. And again, to be clear on this, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, right? Like, could there be a pathogenic disease causing virus? Absolutely, there could. But the foundational evidence, especially the evidence that we're using to flip the entire fucking world upside down right now, is inherently flawed and by definition pseudoscientific. So that's why I, beat this drum so much. And it is important because, yes, we may get to the understanding that that COVID-19, or like, it seems to be that way right now, that the tides are really starting to turn, where I'd say more and more people are starting to understand that COVID-19 is not what we're told, right? But what's stopping them from doing COVID-21, COVID-23, a new bioweapon, a new variant of COVID that's more deadly? If we don't get to the root now that the foundational evidence for virology is by definition pseudoscientific, and we need to maybe start looking at the true causes of disease from a different lens, and that we need to, be taking steps to be well, because what is built off of this, for whatever purpose you could say it's for malicious intent, I think there's it's that, as well as profit, for control, everything, is that because we have this in our mind, we think, oh, all nutrition, all that other shit is irrelevant. The only thing that we need to do to be healthy is just defend against this by taking vaccines, by wearing masks, by distancing from other people, because this is so ingrained into our psyche, right? And that's where it's important to get back to questioning the foundational evidence behind this, and understanding that we don't need to be fearful of each other, that there is, per the available evidence, no pathogenic disease-causing agent that is going from person to person and causing massive amounts of harm, that health is a function of your nutrition, function of your lifestyle, function of your mindfulness, your connection to source, your time in nature, your connection to other people, your ability to heal your trauma. That is what health is.
100%, man. I mean, you speak truth. I mean, I couldn't agree more, especially with this last few sentences. And, going back to what, Joel, you asked in terms of, why aren't more people even speaking out? And it's like, if you fully believe these...
Did I even answer your question, Joel? I'm sorry if I didn't. Dude.
If you fully believe in a certain foundational information, and you've applied that, and you've worked in a career for 20 years, 30 years, and you have a house, and you have bills to pay, and you have kids to go to college, like, it's the reason why there's a small percentage of human beings that become whistleblowers, and that completely risk livelihood, career, reputation to speak out. It's because there's a cognitive dissonance, that word gets used often, that comes into play. Like, you would have to literally come face to face. You talk about dark night of the soul, face to face, that all that money you spent in school, all that education, all the time spent doing research, or whatever the case may be, that maybe was based on something that isn't true. And how many people have the psycho-emotional fortitude, knowledge of self, to sit with that reality? I mean, that's one of the deepest vulnerabilities, to question your identity, to question your livelihood, your career, who you are as a person, everything you believe. Not many people have the ability to do that. And so this goes beyond just this one instance. You could look at that in every field that someone's been at for 10, 20, 30 years, and maybe that also has been built on some foundational falsehood. It's very challenging for a person's psyche to hold that.
Dude, some of my friends that went to West Point with me that are in the Army and still in the Army, or even I think of my father-in-law, who is a retired full bird colonel and still works a government job right now for the Department of Corrections. And they will not go there on 9/11. They will not go there on 9/11. Yep. And then even when it came to this COVID situation, I had a conversation with my father-in-law, and I gave him all the evidence and data, and then broke it down logically, how none of this is making sense. And how he responded after I gave him all that was I've worked in the government for a long time, and I just do not believe that they could pull one over on someone like me. And that's where it is, man. It's the cognitive dissonance of having to face the reality of all the time and money and energy you've invested in this one thing, especially if you are self-identifying with it, rather than just self-identifying with exploration, or self-identifying with perceiving, experiencing. If you're self-identifying with that which you have perceived, that which you've experienced, that which you have explored, then you are prone to be hurt, and you will not want to go there on any of this.
Yeah. The huge thing that I think is happening everywhere is people think they're too smart to be fooled. They think they're too smart. And it's like this quote that it's been attributed to Mark Twain, but I don't think he even said it. But you know how quotes go around. It's easier to fool people than it is to convince them that they've been fooled.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly, man.
So let's drive this one home for the audience. For clarity from your perspective, is there foundational evidence for any disease in history?
So this is tough because, like, for example, relating it back to COVID or to AIDS.
Yep.
COVID and AIDS are a set of symptoms that you can actually observe, right? Like COVID-19 is a series of symptoms. AIDS is a series of symptoms. HIV or SARS-CoV-2 are this alleged causes of COVID-19 and of AIDS. So like the diseases themselves, like, yes, like when you like tie together multiple symptoms and you come up with like, okay, these symptoms are the expression of this disease. Yes, you could technically say that those are real things that exist. Now, I don't think putting a label on anything is helpful whatsoever, because it's just your body expressing symptoms in order to begin to heal itself. Like any fucking label, we need to get rid of all of them. And just like, regardless of what it is, we need to heal our trauma. We need to eat clean, right? Like eat and not eat clean out of fear, eat clean because we love our bodies. Yep. We need to exercise. We need to detox. Like it's the same regardless of what it is. And again, there's some nuance to that, but the point is, like, there is evidence for disease. It's that the lack of evidence for what we are claiming to be the causes of disease. That's the issue. Even when it comes to bacteria. I don't think that there's any good evidence that shows bacteria is at the foundation the cause of disease. Now, can bacteria consume toxic? I mean, because we know bacteria's role in nature is to consume decaying tissue and bring it back to the earth, or to consume toxins and then decompose them and bring it back to the earth, right? That's the role of bacteria in nature. Now, if bacteria is eating toxic flesh in high amounts, then bacteria will poop, or the byproduct of bacteria will be toxic. So in that case, like, yes, bacteria can cause disease, but is it really that bacteria are the cause, or were you already toxic?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to bacteria and viruses, I don't think have ever been shown to exist. So I don't even like using that word because of the implications behind virus. But it's the causes of these diseases that are in question, right? It's the cause of disease.
Yep.
Well, new paradigm.
Hope I didn't ramble too much and made sense.
No, dude, you didn't.
Man, you're
man.
making so much sense.
You're making sense. And for me, my big wake. Oh, you go, man.
No, and we've kind of addressed this from different perspectives with different guests, but even for me, I'm getting deeper insights as to really what's going on here, man. Then this is the beauty of all this, is there truly is a new paradigm, which is probably closer to the real paradigm, being born out of us being forced to question disease based on what's going on, you know. But obviously, people following mandates and towing the line of what the government says is so much deeper than just fear of disease at this point, you know. And that's the saddest part, is how many people have gone against their own deeper sense of morality and their own will, due to being forced or coerced and being threatened in terms of their livelihood and their jobs. So it's beyond disease for a lot of people out there too.
Yeah, and people have been just so indoctrinated and propagandized and conditioned. I mean, that's where I always default back to. And like, do I get pissed off at the people who are like blindly obedient? Yeah, I do. But I also have to have compassion for them, because it's like what Jesus said when he was on the cross, man. He said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And it's like, when it comes to these people, forgive them, for they know not what they do. They don't know. They haven't had an experience that is like shook them awake. You know what I mean? Like, had I not experienced what I had experienced growing up and seeing my mom and my wife transition out of allopathic medicine, I don't know that I'd be able to see. I would fucking hope so, because by now it's getting increasingly obvious, but I don't know that I would be able to see, right? And I am more concerned with the large number of people who can see that there's something wrong, and are too afraid or just too apathetic to wake up. And to quote my main man, Jesus Christ again, is I would rather you be hot or cold than be lukewarm. If you're lukewarm, I'll spit you out of my mouth. And we have so many people who are in that apathetic state of, they're too afraid to speak. And there's nuance to everything. So there's some situations where like, fuck, like if I say one word, I will lose my job that's providing money for like providing food for my kid. I'm barely making ends meet as it is. So like, I get it. But there are so many people who know something is wrong, but as long as they have their football, their basketball, they have their like shows on Netflix, they have, their fast food, this and that, they don't give a shit. They'll just let this happen and let tyranny take control and take hold of everything.
Well, yeah, but this is where the propaganda comes into play. I mean, you're looking at decades and decades of Hollywood, of media, of TV shows. And I mean, I remember my wife and I liked watching This Is Us. It's like a nice little show.
Yeah, I used to love that show.
Yeah, bro. And we loved that show. And then the last season, dude, like whatever it was, last season, we put it on. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like they just literally took whatever was going on, current events, and applied into it. And then I'm always so curious. Like I watched an old show that I used to like, and like from 20 years ago, and before I got into this stuff, and I see the little things that they put in there that support virology, that support this whole paradigm, allopathic medicine. Oh, you're gonna need to take medicine for the rest of your life. You know that, right, sweetheart? Yes, you're gonna need to do it for the rest of your life because you have this XY disease, whatever. Okay, and so in This Is Us, there was this scene where Kate, I think was her name, she brought like their baby to the pediatrician. The scene was over, bro. There was no need for it to exist. And then the nurse goes, remember to come back next week for your vaccines. Cut to next scene.
Dude.
Like it was over. I was just like, all right, okay, cool. So again, so back to that thing, it's like, yeah, some people know better, but they've been conditioned for so long to think certain things, and then bring in crowd psychology, like what it's like to separate from a herd, how that also is destabilizing for some people. My parents aren't going to like me. My friends aren't going to like me. Like people I work with aren't going to like me. And so again, the psycho-emotional fortitude to be able to stand in your truth. And what does that mean? Like it's harder for certain people. So
it is.
I'm not saying that's an excuse, but that's just the reality of why people don't do the things they do. If we're sitting here analyzing behavior, these are different elements to that.
For sure. And like there's a lot, but again, there is that crowd of people who absolutely know something is wrong. And it's not even coming from a fear perspective. They just don't care because it's just like, as long as I have this and that, I don't feel the need to speak up. And it's like that is really bothersome.
Well, they're the ones that know what they do, right? To reference the Jesus quote, that's the lukewarm right there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just one more note on the propaganda. I was watching this kid show on Netflix with my daughter called Ohana or something like that. It was a cute show, nothing wrong with it. But anyway, at the start, they travel from New York to Hawaii. When they get to Hawaii, they're all wearing stickers on their shoulders just to show that they've had a vaccine. Like, what the hell? Just little subtle things that go in there.
Little things. Well, and like, think of how nefarious that is too, because the way it's done, even on the This Is Us, like, don't forget to come back and get your vaccine. It's not even that, like, it's not trying to press it upon you as like, oh, you need to believe this. It's like, of course, this is something that we do. It's not even like in questions, like just like in passing, like, of course, this is how it is, right? Like, of course, that's how it is, Yeah.
My wife and I don't watch like regular TV, so we don't see commercials, okay? But we were watching something recently on Hulu. So you watch Hulu, commercials kind of come in, and even just within the commercials, they're just like, if you want this thing to just be done, why are you having these commercials where everyone's wearing masks, everyone doing like the Band-Aids, it's just like, why are they bringing this in to like our consciousness? Like, it's just weird. Like, that's the weirdest thing. Like, why are all these people and actors on commercials wearing masks? Like,
dude,
I think it's just silly to me.
Because just like how in airports they said that the stuff that TSA does would be temporary to fight terror. It's the same thing now. This was supposed to be temporary, or so they said,
Yeah, 2 weeks to flatten the curve, 600 days later.
Yeah,
You know, 2 weeks to stop terrorists from coming into the United States. Take your fucking shoes off like 20 years later.
Yeah. Or the Patriot Act. We get to monitor everything you do because of terrorism now. It's a slow drip, man. It's a slow drip where they slowly change things, and it's like one thing leads to another. And if you don't have the wherewithal to understand what they're doing, then you're going to be conditioned to just accept the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's why it's so important right now to turn people back to themselves, to empower people to trust their own observations and experiences. And at the least, when you do that, they start that inward process and they start questioning what's going on in reality.
Oh, you've hit the nail on the head, man. And that's the biggest problem, is that most people cannot trust themselves because we're so used to and so conditioned to externalize the truth and to look everywhere else for it except ourselves, right? Even within the truth community, we want to find someone who has the truth, just so we don't have to do the work ourselves. We want to find someone that's got the answers, someone that we can rely on, just anything that's safe, as opposed to...
This is such... I was talking with my wife about this the other day. How many people in the truth community are trying to pose themselves as like some authority figure expert that everyone should outsource to?
Yeah.
Bothers the shit out of me so much, which is why every single time I speak, I make a point to empower people to trust their own observations and experiences first. Yeah. I'm just I say this almost to a fault where it's almost like kind of awkward how many I say it. I'm just a random 29-year-old white dude. You can do the same shit that I do. Like, you can do the same shit that I do. I'm not some authority. I want you to trust your own observations and experiences. Take information from all sides. Take what I said about virology. Go explore for yourself, though. Don't blindly trust what I say. Go explore that shit for yourself, please. I mean, that's even what Dr. Cowan told me to do when I was continually questioning him. He said, Alec, you are smart enough to figure this out for yourself, right? Yeah. He could have said, oh, you just need to blindly trust that I know this. I don't want that. I want people to go fucking explore. Explore for yourself.
How deep into your army career were you when you woke up to 9/11, or even to the fact that there was never nukes in Iraq?
So that was before I started my health journey, so to speak. Like when all the stuff happened with my mom and Kelly Brogan, that was in the middle of 2016. Mm-hmm. But I had been looking into 9/11 and stuff around 2014, 2013. And was pretty undecided on, like, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance. And here I was at a military academy about to come into the army, So it was a tough thing for me. But as I began to, start down the rabbit hole of questioning everything else in 2016, that's when I really became solid in my perceptions on 9/11 and everything else. And I never went to West Point dreaming of being in the army. It was really, I went there again because of basketball like that. And okay, yeah, just hoops, man. I just wanted to hoop, and then I got cut. But then I stayed because, dude, having a degree within the matrix, having a degree from West Point meant a lot to me. So I was like, just stay here, serve 5 years in the army, get out. I always knew that I wasn't going to make the army a career, and I was going to get out after my minimum of 5 years. And I was just sort of rationalizing in my mind, okay, whatever I can to stay out of situations for combat. And, it's kind of cool because I kind of manifested that. There's this program in the Army called the U.S. Army World Class Athlete Program, where if you're on a U.S. national team for any of the Olympic sports, you do that full time for any Olympic qualification period. So back up, when I got cut from the basketball team at West Point, I was playing pickup basketball in the gym, very beginning of my freshman year. And I got approached by this dude who was a senior who saw me playing pickup basketball. And he said, hey man, you should come try out for the handball team. And I was like, handball? I was thinking the game where you hit the ball against the wall. I was like, what are you? Yeah. I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, no, it's not what you think. I got cut from the lacrosse team when I was a freshman. I found handball. Come try out. I promise you'll love it. So West Point has a handball team, a rugby team, and a water polo team, and a men's volleyball team, where everyone who gets cut or quits from the basketball, football, baseball, soccer, or lacrosse team goes and plays those sports. So I happened to come across handball. just like you're doing. What, dude? Yerasimos. Sorry,
You're awesome. Just think you're awesome most of the time. That's all you remember my name, dude. You're awesome most of the time. You're awesome.
I love that so much. You're awesome most of the time. I like that. You're awesome most. Okay. Like, yes, that handball, like where you're throwing a ball into a goal. So I end up playing handball at West Point, like in there, like all the clubs that we play against around the United States. Like there's one in Chicago, a few in New York and other places. And they're all comprised of people who grew up playing it in Europe or South America, because it's huge in those countries, and live in the United States now. So they just like form a local team. And then there's a few college teams as well. But I got good enough to where my junior year, a U.S. national team coach saw me playing and was like, "Hey, I want you to try out for the U.S. national team." And I was like, "I can't, because I have to be in the Army." And he was like, "Oh, au contraire, yes, you can, because there's a program in the Army, like I said, where you can do that full time." And so I was like, this is the way, man. So tried out for the U.S. national team, made it. And then I was in the U.S. Army world-class athlete program from the beginning of 2018 through the end of 2019, just training as a athlete and playing professional handball in Germany, training with the U.S. national team in Auburn at the time. That's where the U.S. men's and women's team trained. So that's what I did for 2 out of my 5 years in the Army.
Dude, that's so cool, man. You know, this is another thing why I love that we focus with this podcast. It's not just like, who are you? What do you do? Tell us. It's like, we love people's stories, man. Like, how many people on Instagram know that you're fucking an avid handball player? I mean, I don't know, dude. Like, I don't, maybe you have talked about it, but I haven't heard it.
Not really, man. Like, I don't like it, because it usually ends up being a long conversation of like, when I say, yeah, I was on the U.S. national team for handball, they're like, "Oh, handball. Like, I used to play that. Like, I used to play doubles with my partner, at the men's club." And I'm like, "No, it's not that handball." And then it's like a long conversation.
I went to, my family's from Greece. So I was in Greece for the 2004 Olympics, and I spent like the summer there, and I went to a handball match. I don't know who played who, but I was like, this is so cool, because I love like these weird games or sports like that are different. Because handball, is it pretty much like water polo but on the ground?
Water polo on land, or like you could say lacrosse with your hands instead of sticks. Because on defense you can check, right, or you can wrap people up. You can't like take them to the ground. You do get taken to the ground, but dude, it's like the perfect American sport, or maybe Australian sport, that Americans and Australians don't really play. Like it's fast paced. It has a lot of contact. You jumps, like you want to be able to jump super high. You want to be able to run fast. You throw a ball as hard as you can. Cool. It's the best, man. It's such a fun sport. And I was very fortunate to get to play. It was pretty funny. Our U.S. national team qualifier. So we had our qualifier against Canada to qualify for the Pan American Games, which is like the North and South America's version of the Olympics that qualifies for the Olympics, right? And our qualifier against Canada, we had 16 dudes on that roster. And I want to say only 6 out of the 16 dudes on that roster were born and raised in the United States. The other 10 dudes that were on the roster were like German American, French American, Egyptian American, Swedish American, that their mom just happened to have U.S. citizenship for some reason, or like something, and they weren't good enough to make their national team. So they're like, I'm going to play on the U.S. national team. So we had dudes on our team that had never even lived in America before. They were playing for the United States, and like half of them couldn't speak English. It was pretty funny.
That's pretty awesome. One more question I have. Have the skills that you've gained from handball made you an amazing dodgeball player?
I'd say it made me awful at dodgeball, because it's the exact opposite of handball, right? Like you're wanting, I mean, maybe like,
no, but I feel like because you throw an accuracy, you could just hit a person, you have great.
Yeah, I guess that's yes. Throwing. Yes. Especially because like I can throw with both hands too. So that's pretty cool. But I guess like dodging a ball, I'm also thinking from the perspective of a goalie in handball. I've never played goalie in handball, but it's funny, like, cause we would play at West Point, especially, we'd play dodgeball as a warm-up game sometimes, just for fun. And it was funny seeing the goalies have to shift their perception, because like a goalie, you want to get hit by the ball to try to stop it. and then you were having to see goalies now like not want to get hit by the ball. So it's like messing with their yeah. But yeah, I can throw pretty well now, especially because the ball is this big and it's like a pound. So
yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
I love it, man. Well,
I like this. This is a nice change of pace where I'm not talking about.
I mean, listen, we get to talk about some personal stuff. We get to talk about some real shit too. Like we're just, three dudes doing our part, having a good conversation. I love it, man. I'm really thankful for you making the time and coming on our show.
Dude, this was great. And you're awesome most of the time. I'm never gonna...
It's true, dude. Like I can get behind most of the time. I'm definitely not all the time. Like you can ask my wife. She probably won't say all the time.
Yeah,
I'm never going to forget that. Oh, man. That's great. That's great.
Alec, man, so grateful. So much deep respect for what you do, the way you stand, and the path that you've chosen to take, man, during this course of the time. It's so needed and so necessary. There's no coincidences. There's only synchronicities. And thank you for being you, bro. Really.
Yeah.
Dude, thank you guys for having me. This was awesome. This was super fun.
Awesome, dude. Well, yeah.
Man.
Well, to everyone out there listening, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Take care, guys.
Peace.
Smoking mirrors, I'm seeing through the illusion. Waking up in a time they think you're in a delusion. Somebody set the alarms, cause they be too busy snoozing. I'm in a DeLorean.